Hi, I'm Yinka, and this is The Hurt Locker, a podcast where we open a door into men's mental health. Come and go.
Black men in our communities, they don't want to go to the doctors anyway, only if they're in pain. But when it comes to prostate, they don't even want to have the conversation.
But that narrative needs to change, doesn't it?
But I say, you ask me any question and I will answer it for you.
And I'm just trying to imagine it now.
It's like I was crying on the inside. After you've been diagnosed with prostate cancer, you think about death and they think about erection. And mental health makes a big difference still with your recovery.
You're listening to The Hurt Locker, podcast that opens the door on men's mental health. And as part of Prostate Awareness Month, especially within the Black community, we're continuing our theme as we talk to members of the Black community who have lived experiences. And for tonight's guest, we have Alfred Fagan. Alfred, welcome to The Hurt Locker.
Hello.
How are you today?
I'm okay, thank you.
Good. And so can I ask, which part of the world, which part of the country are you in?
Birmingham,
you're a Brummie then, yes?
Birmingham, inner city Birmingham.
Okay. Is that born and raised?
Yes.
Okay. Welcome to The Hurt Locker, Alfred.
No problem.
So we've got you on specifically because you've had lived experiences.
Yeah.
You've been through the pathway, as it were, of receiving a diagnosis. Could you tell me a little bit more about this as we begin?
I've had prostate cancer. Well, I had prostate cancer 12 years ago. And the only reason I found out, I happened to be at the doctor's one day and he just mentioned to me about having a PSA test. So I had a PSA test and since then my life was changed.
So tell me, before your GP asked you to take a PSA test, how much information or what knowledge did you have of prostate cancer?
The only knowledge I had, a friend of mine, but he's 10 years older than me, he had prostate cancer, but I didn't know any of the details, really, what prostate cancer was. But a few months before I had my PSA test, there was a series on telly this morning and Samuel Jackson and a few people was talking about men's health and prostate cancer. That was about 12 years ago. So that's the only thing I actually knew about it.
Alfred, if you don't mind me saying, you're much younger than me.
Right.
And you say 12 years ago you received a diagnosis. How old were you?
I was 50. Technically then you thought it was a young age for prostate cancer, but I'm 62 in April.
You're looking good. I've got to say that you're looking good. And so when you did take the PSA test and it came back with the results, what were your initial thoughts?
The whole experience was frightening. When they said my PSA was I, then I had to go to the hospital, for a follow-up. So I went to the hospital and they said, your PSA is I, so we're going to have to do a biopsy. So I was scared of that anyway. So I had the biopsy, but everything to me at the time went downhill when I went back for the results. Because when you go for the results, you end up going in a room and you notice there's like a Macmillan nurse with the doctors. So from then, your head starts really pounding. And the letter came back early. They told me I was going to have the results in a month, but I had a letter in 2 weeks telling me to come back. So that's when everything started to go a bit downhill.
When you walked into that room, were you alone?
No, I went with my daughter because my daughter was off work that day, and because she works at an hospital, I just thought I brought her along with me, so just in case there's anything complicated, someone there to explain the situation.
Was she aware of what you were going to the hospital for?
Yeah, she knew what I was going there for, but we just didn't know what they was going to say to me when I was in that room.
And when you did receive the news, what was your daughter's response?
Well, I tried not to look at her because I know if I looked at her, it would make me want to cry. But at the time, as soon as he said, we found cancer, in my mind, it was like a death sentence. But from then, everything just went quiet. They were speaking, but I couldn't hear anything at all because my brain was just... I remember saying to the doctors, can you speak? You know, when they was giving me some leaflets, because that's what they do. I said, can you speak to my daughter? Because at the time, they were speaking to me, but my brain was completely somewhere else. Yeah, it's like being in a room, but you're not in the room.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I'm just trying to imagine it now, how that must have felt for you.
It's like I was crying on the inside. I just believed I was going to die. Someone said, you've got cancer. I thought at the time, I'm going to die. Because especially 12 years ago, the information what's out here now wasn't really there 12 years ago.
Okay. Before the doctor had mentioned it to you to take the PSA test, had you ever considered, or did you ever thought about going for a checkup yourself? You would have been 50 at the time. Had you spoke to your friends, family members about this?
No, not at all. It's only because I saw the thing on the TV with Samuel Jackson and they was doing a thing about men's health. That was mentioned, but I was still young. It's still something for older men. That's how I saw it at the time.
Do you think this is that thought process is typical of black men within our communities, our respective communities?
Black men in our communities, they don't want to go to the doctors anyway, only if they're in pain. But when it comes to prostate, they don't even want to have the conversation.
Why do you think that is?
Sometimes it could be because they're scared. That could be one thing. And a lot of people do say from generational experiences, from things in our past through the generation. So we don't really trust doctors until we're actually sick. We don't go to the doctors, not unless we're sick. There's no point in going to a doctor when there's nothing wrong with me.
But that narrative needs to change, doesn't it?
It does need to change. So that's why I do what I try to do. But I can understand it in a way. You're telling someone who's technically fit and healthy to go to the doctors. And in the lives what we live now, we ain't got no time for that. There's nothing wrong with
it. It's not a priority.
Yeah.
Tell me about the process for you once you did receive that diagnosis.
I went home. I went and told my mom. And I remember when I went to tell my mom, my sister was in the room. And my sister went to give me an hug. And I put my hands up straight away and told her, no, don't touch me.
Why was that?
Because if she had hugged me, it would have made me cry. You know, when I know inside I was crying inside. And being a man the way we are, you put this brick wall up, but this brick wall's there, even though it's tearing you apart on the inside. So you look from the outside one way, but inside, this wall's been breaking down. So I didn't want it to hug me because I wouldn't have been able to hold my emotions back. And it's still strange, especially as a black man. You're in front of your own sister and you can't even relax because we still have this strong image or got to hold it all in. So that in itself was a bit strange. But still on that day, I'm thinking, I'm going to die. I do weightlifting. And for a while, I actually stopped doing weightlifting. I just stopped because I just thought, what's the point? But after thinking about it, I ended up starting to go back to the gym. But one of the problems what I had at the time, there was no support from nowhere. I remember going online and having a look, prostate cancer, like support or things like that. And it's still strange. Birmingham itself doesn't even have one. The second biggest city, but we haven't actually got one in Birmingham. And inner city Birmingham, nothing at all at that time.
What about now?
On the borders of Birmingham, there's one in Solihull, what I go to when I help out sometimes, Solihull Cancer Support Group, and there's one in Sutton Coldfield. But Birmingham itself hasn't actually got one. And it's still strange. The size of that city, you'd think there'd be a few around.
Absolutely.
Like yesterday, I went to one in Sutton Coldfield. Sutton Coldfield is more, I'd say more like a white area, for instance. So when you go there, it might have been another black person there, but otherwise you don't really see black people at these support groups. I can still understand why, because they can't open up in front of these people. So when you want support, Macmillan, they do a good job for what they do, but to me, for prostate cancer, they can't help a man for what he's going through, especially a young man. A young man's got things going on in his head. He wants certain questions answered. And a Macmillan nurse, my opinion, can't give a man the information he needs.
Why do you think that is?
Why? Right. I was 50 at the time. And prior to having an operation, they said to me some of the side effects you might have, because they only give you leaflets. No one actually really talks to you, not like the way you can get the information now. They gave you these leaflets, assuming you could read, you know what I mean? Because they'd always jump to that conclusion. And the leaflet will have some of the side effects: incontinence, possible side effects, erectile dysfunction. So how do I speak to this 80-year-old, 85-year-old white lady and say, oh, will I be able to have an erection? You know, the things what you are worrying about, because these are the things men worry about. After death with prostate cancer, they worry about erection first, then incontinence. Some of them don't even know about the incontinence. Their brain hasn't even took them to that bit because they're still thinking about erectile dysfunction. So how do I speak to this 80-year-old, 85-year-old old white lady about erectile dysfunction? And them are the things what you go home and you worry about. But who do you speak to about that?
Do you think it would have been easier if it been a black Macmillan nurse?
No.
Male or female?
Male would have been easier to speak to, and not necessarily an older person, but a male would be easier to speak to, because a Macmillan nurse, female, she can't actually say to me, oh, what does it feel like not being able to have an erection? You know, all the little questions, even because men want to go deeper with the conversation.
Absolutely.
But they start off on a softer level, but that's what
on a surface level, yes.
Yeah. So normally when I speak to men, because this is what I do, I'll go around speaking to men about it. I always say to them, you can ask me any question you want. I will answer the question for you, because I know what they want to ask me. I don't directly say to me, you can ask me about your erections, but I say, you ask me any question and I will answer it for you. And that would have been good for me, because it helps you mentally through your surgery if you sort of know what might be the outcome. Because I'm guaranteed to you, black, white, or whatever, after you've been diagnosed with prostate cancer, you think about death and they think about erection. And them are the things what keeps them up at night.
Excuse the pun.
Yeah, but most of them don't worry about incontinence, because they haven't even got that far yet to even realize that was one of the other things what's going to cause them a problem. Because they're thinking about the erection so much after death. It makes you worry. You can't relax. You can't even feel comfortable having your operation. And this information is not there. You can't really pick up a leaflet and find the information you want to know. And one of the things as well, when you get someone's told you've got prostate cancer, you think the information's there, but the doctor doesn't actually give you information. It'll give you a leaflet. And you've got so much going on in your head, you can't understand it. And at the time, you're thinking, you haven't even decided what type of operation you're going to have. Because there's loads of different forms of treatments you can have. And there's no one to break that down for you and tell you the truth. And I had that word there, the truth. Because in there, I always find there's a bit of complications as well. Because I remember when I had mine years ago, my options was have it removed, or you could have brachytherapy. Brachytherapy is like a form of surgery. They don't actually remove it. They put these little pellets, like radiation pellets, about the size of rice grains, really small, into your prostate. So you don't have to have it removed.
And what's the effects of that? What's the impact of that?
It pumps out radiation and it's meant to, shrink the cancer. But one of the problems with that at the time, the person what does brachytherapy is going to tell you it's the best. But the person who does surgery he tells you it's the best. So you've got loads of different options, but you don't know when someone's giving you this decision you've got to make when you don't understand anything medical.
Absolutely.
And that can add to the stress.
That type of surgery with the, like, for want of a better phrase, those little radiation pellets inside the prostate, did that stop you from ejaculating, etc.?
What it was, I was going to have that option because everyone's scared of having a major operation. So that sounded the easier option. You're in and out of hospital easier or whatever. But it still has side effects. You still can have erectile dysfunction from it because it's pumping out radiation. You still can end up incontinent from it. But the problem with that, later on down the line, because it's pumping out radiation, no one mentions you may get bowel cancer later on. And when you think, I remember my daughter saying to me, because she said, Dad, you know, you're worried that you might have to have a bag for your wee, you know, if I have the operation.
Yeah.
She said this, because she worked after, she says, Dad, what they're not telling you, you know, you're always worried about having a bag for your poo. They're not telling you later on with the brachytherapy, you can end up with bowel cancer and end up with a bag for your poo. So straight away, that made my mind up. I had the surgery instead and had it removed.
Okay.
And plus, with the surgery, it's more invasive, but at least the cancer's out your body.
Okay. And in terms of intimacy since the surgery, how's that impacted you?
Lucky for me, because I found it early, I had a surgery called something else as well. People don't even hear these words. I had a surgery called nerve-sparing surgery.
Okay.
When they done the biopsy, they took 12 samples and they found 6. In the 6, I think 6 of them had cancer. So they knew I had cancer. But my cancer was still at an early stage and it was within my prostate. So your prostate, say, like the size of a walnut.
Yes.
But my cancer, what they found was in, say, like in the middle.
Okay.
But around your prostate, you've got nerves, what affects your erectile functions. So by finding it early, there is a surgery called nerve-sparing surgery, what men can have. And they try to protect the nerves. And by trying to protect the nerves, gives you a better chance of still being able to have erections later on.
Okay.
But men who delay or don't go and have a PSA test until they're in pain or they can't woo,
that option's taken.
that option can be taken away.
Yes. Yes.
So that's one of the benefits as well, getting to the doctors early.
Just picking up on the point of Macmillan nurses, etc. We spoke with Keith Morgan from Prostate Cancer UK, and he tells us now that there are specialist nurses there, you know, male and females, and so it must be easier to have those deeper, meaningful conversations with them rather than speaking to an elderly white Macmillan nurse, etc.
Oh, yeah, I can understand that. Prostate Cancer UK do a brilliant job because that's who I volunteer for. So I wouldn't be doing none of this without them. But you can always pick the phone up and speak to a specialist nurse. But when you get diagnosed, you're in a room with a doctor. Prostate Cancer UK can't really be there for you. So that's why they have Macmillan nurses. They can't really be, well, they're in London anyway. And say in Birmingham, you might have, I don't know, 5 volunteers for Prostate Cancer UK, but they volunteer doing various things. But it's the point where the stress and the mental issues come into it is when you're in that room.
Absolutely.
And some people can't cope with it from that point when you're told, because the doctor don't look at a piece of paper and think, oh, this person's suffering with depression or this person's that before he tells them. I know some people who have told them you've got cancer, that's it. I've been with some people, you know, when they have to go back for their results.
Yes.
People I know sometimes, I'll go with them because sometimes they need someone to put certain questions to the doctor for them. But it's that point when you're in that room. Prostate cancer, if you've got things you need to think about or you're not sure, at least you can always phone them. That's there. But it's the point when that hits you. And if you had a problem or was worried about your erectile dysfunction and you weren't sure, you're still better off, instead of speaking to this nurse what read something when she was in college, if you spoke to me, I can give you a different...
A lowdown.
Because I've been through it. I know what it feels like. When someone says when you have your prostate removed, you can still orgasm, but you have a dry orgasm, can that person say, this lady, she can be 25, 30, tell you what that feels like? You know what I mean?
Yes,
I
absolutely.
saw it on a leaflet when she was doing a college course. It's a bit different. Your doctor can't even answer that question for you. So sometimes supporting people can make a difference when you sort of live that experience.
100%.
Because every time I speak to someone, when they want to be open, especially if they've had the surgery, I always say to them, are you still leaking? That means, are you still incontinent? What type of surgery do you have? Are you having certain tablets for your erectile dysfunction? So certain things like that, like a lady on the phone couldn't say to you, oh, if you take a Viagra, it's going to give you an headache. She saw it on a leaflet, says you may get an headache, but can she really tell you what the headache feels like?
Understood. Alf, if you don't mind me saying, you look 15 years younger. Your age, you know.
Yeah, I try to keep fit if I can.
That's good.
Yeah.
Prostate cancer says black men should get checked out at 45 years of age, as it were. However, the question I'm going to ask is, does the leaflet, the information, does it show younger aged men? Or is it younger or middle-aged black men? Should it be younger aged men? And that relates to earlier diagnosis as well. We were talking off screen about that and its importance.
Right. I had this conversation yesterday at a support group, because I did say to them, when I first started to volunteer for prostate cancer, they used to have some leaflets. They might still have some around. And on that leaflet, I always remember there was a picture of a black man on the leaflet. And he had like it looked like he had a walking stick, and he looked to me as a black person about, was 90 years old, struggling to walk. And I say to people, when I used to see that leaflet, and if I see that leaflet now, I wouldn't pick that leaflet up because it doesn't apply to me. You're telling me this is for an old man, this is for my granddad.
Yes.
By having an old man on that leaflet, you're telling me this leaflet is for an old man.
It's for the future.
You want someone who's 45 to pick that leaflet up, it better look like someone that looks like them.
Brilliant.
It's like the leaflet's talking to that individual in any form, even if you're dealing with mental health. If you put an old person on that leaflet, and even though you're trying to say anyone can suffer with mental health, that leaflet will not apply to that person. The first visual look, because that's where your brain makes the choice, you won't pick it up.
Thank you. And how have you been since you're living in this lived experience now?
Yeah, well, mine's 12 years. Mine's gone. As I said, I'm not incontinent. Was incontinent for about 3 months after the operation, because when you do have the operation, you leave the hospital with a catheter because of the operation and the pipe you have to cut. So that bit in itself was a bit really, you felt really down. I had my operation about in October. And I remember for about 6 weeks, all I done was sat on the settee and watched telly because I had a pad. Because the feeling of having a pad, you can call it a nappy, let's get to the points for people. It makes you feel so low. It's really, you don't want to go out.
Yes.
It's like at the moment, there's a campaign, bins in toilets. They're trying to get bins in men's toilets. Because what happens, women have got bins in their toilets, but there's no bins in men's toilets, no bins in the workplace. So you go out, if a bloke's got a pad and his pad's wet, even if he had a spare one in his bag or his pocket, what does he do with the other pad? So that whole situation slows down your recovery because you've got another problem to overcome.
Yes.
And it's not easy. You go to a men's toilet, after time, there's no door on the toilet anyway. They're broken or whatever. Or a bloke at work, he might have to change his pad 3 times, but he's at work. And you've got big companies, say, like the Rover in Birmingham, one of the biggest employers in Birmingham, but there's no bins in the toilets.
Yes.
So that bloke, once they get back to work, trust me, he will be on the sick, and he'll make sure he gets a sick note off his doctor, because he's going through that, but now he's got the shame of he's got a pad and he can't change his pad.
Absolutely.
Or it's like little things are just jabbing at you all the time with your mental health. And I know with black men, they'll keep it in. They'll buckle it up and keep it in. But sometimes not all of them can come out the other end without it just blowing.
Yes. Alfred, this has been fascinating talking to you. You know, I think it's important to stress that black men are doubly at risk. What would you say to listeners who are putting off having a test or haven't had the PSA or DRE?
At the moment, mainly everyone can then end up having a PSA test anyway. They don't really put the finger up your bum anymore.
Yes.
It's just a simple blood test. And especially if a man's in his 50s, you go to some doctors and the doctor will say, why do you want this? But you need to remember, it is your legal right to have one. And part of surviving, it's your right. If you have problems getting one off your doctor, if you contact Prostate Cancer UK, their specialist nurse, I think they can give you advice to contact your doctor. But you need to have this test, and you need to have it done every year. Don't let your doctor put you off, because all it is, it's just a blood. A lot of people have blood tests anyway. They don't realise it's not an extra blood test. It's just a tick in the box. You know what I mean? In the box. Then if you do end up, then after that, something's wrong. Sometimes your PSA could be high for different reasons. Doesn't mean you've got prostate cancer.
Okay.
But you just need to know support is out there. You've got to find it. You know what I mean? But support's out there. But them support groups and mental health groups do help. As I said, Birmingham's got 2 on the edge of Birmingham. There's no cancer support group in Birmingham. But there's groups like in Birmingham, you got men's health and well-being groups. They can help, because at least them groups, they talk about all different things, mental health and everything. And sometimes, especially a bloke, if he lived on his own and he hasn't got a wife or no family, he's going through all that on his own. And mental health makes a big difference still with your recovery, because the way you feel, the way you think makes a big difference. So, but support's out there, but you've got to find it, but not enough support. They need more support groups.
Can I ask one final question?
Yeah.
Who's the most important person in your life?
Right. I've got children.
You can only pick one.
I have got children, but I always say my mom. My mom is the one I worry about. The reason I worry about my mom, because she's 87, and I always spend a lot of time worrying what would happen if I wasn't here. When I thought I was going to die with prostate cancer, I was worried about my mom more than I was worried about me.
Okay.
Yeah, the thought I'm going to die doesn't scare me. The thought I'm going to die and who's going to look after my mom, that scares me.
Okay. But if I said the most important person in your life is you,
yeah,
how does that land?
It lands right, because I'm the most important. Because if I can't look after me, I can't look after nobody else.
100%.
Yeah.
100%. Alfred, thank you for being a guest on The Hurt Locker. And thank you for your advice. Much appreciated.
So 1 in 4, maybe 1 in 3, but go and have a test.
Thank you.
The Hurt Locker is a safe space for our guests to openly share their mental health experiences. If you have been affected by any of the content in this recording, then please reach out for support. If it is an emergency, dial 999. If you would like to talk to somebody today, then please call the Samaritans on 116 123. Stay safe. Thanks for listening to this episode of The Hurt Locker. Please give us a rating or share with another listener. You can also follow us on Instagram and Facebook at The Hurt Locker Pod.